Hello and welcome. I hope that you'll enjoy the next 45 minutes or so as we talk about the art and science of lasting love. Nice to see you there, because it is an art. It is something that we grow and develop and nurture, and it's very individual and unique to all of us. Every relationship is individual, every relationship is unique, but there is also a science to it. And that's the part of relationship skills, that's the part of being in a relationship that very few people really know about. It's certainly part of being in a relationship that I didn't know about. So let's go back a few years, and I'll take you to a time in my life when I was very unaware of the relationship skills, and I was very unaware of what I'm going to share with you this evening. It was imagine a cold, dark evening in November, and imagine there I am sitting on a sofa. It's in the gloom. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know if you've ever had a situation like this, but a few months earlier I'd met the man who I really wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and somehow I'd messed up. Somehow I'd done something. I don't know what had happened exactly. I don't even remember. But there I am in the gloom, wondering, how am I going to make this work? How did it get to the point of breakup? And as you do, sitting there, and I wasn't just sitting there, I was also typing. I was texting. So I'm sitting and I'm texting, and I'm doing what I'd done for many years since my first marriage broke up, and I'd been out on the dating scene, and I'd been in relationship after relationship, and finally I'd met this tall, smiley man, and I'd fallen in love and decided that, you know, this would really be the kind of relationship I wanted for the rest of my life. And so I'm texting, trying to analyze, well, what went wrong? How can I make it go better? What can I do to turn this thing around? Because I'm sobbing, because I know I'm really at the edge of something here. And then, as maybe you've done in the past, I started Googling, because I looked at my text and I thought, this is never going to work. This is hopeless. And I'm looking at my text, and then I'm Googling, and I come across this American love guru, and she says, just reduce everything you say to two things. Just say, I feel, and I want, or I don't want. And I looked at my text, and I looked at her advice, and I'm thinking, okay. So I start deleting, delete. And I get to the end, and all I've got left are 3 lines. And the message says, I feel sad. I want to be with you. I don't want to lose you. And it seems a bit pathetic, really, after all that deep analysis I've been doing on, you know, how he could improve, how I could improve. And I sent the message, and I waited and I waited. And the next day I get that little ping on my phone. And there it is. Just 1 line. Your message softened my heart. And that was the first relationship skill that I ever learnt. And 3 weeks after learning that skill, and then beginning to read more about the relationship skills, I got a marriage proposal, and we've been married now for 10 years. We celebrated our anniversary earlier this month. So that's my story of discovering what I'm going to share with you this evening. And I read more deeply into the science of what really was this thing. Why did I have to reduce everything to just the way I felt? I'd already been studying the science of love at this point, so I already knew a lot about communication skills, and I knew a lot about how this thing actually worked. But what I learned that night was that we have to drop from our head to our heart. It was science that actually taught me to love from my heart, not just from my head. And so I want to share with you the story of love and how it goes wrong and how we can put it right. So let me share my screen and share some slides with you, and we can just look at what it is that works and what doesn't work when it comes to love. So here's how it all begins. I don't know, how did it begin for you? Just, you're very welcome to put it in the chat if you wish, or just think about it or talk to your partner about it. How did it begin for you? Often it's that moment, isn't it? That moment of absolute certainty when you know that this is meant to be. And then something goes wrong. Maybe the bubble bursts and things cool off, or maybe they get stormy and you're wondering what happened to my happily ever after. And then maybe you meet someone new and this time it really is meant to be. Or is it? And eventually we find ourselves committing to a relationship, and the joy and the elation that we feel in that moment when we've decided that this really is the person that we want to spend our lives with. And then very quickly, that joy and elation can turn to this. How does it go wrong so fast? What is it that's getting in the way of what we really, really want in love? What we want is this, isn't it? We want to get to a point where we grow old together, where we are just so much in love with each other after year after year after year. When I was in what I often describe as my desperate decade of dating, I asked my mum's neighbours what it was that made their 70-year marriage work. And there he was, bent double, with a really wizened, wrinkly old face. And there she was, freckly, practically bald. And he looked across at her. And then he looked back at me and he said, she's still a vision of gorgeousness. And of course, what they'd done is they'd put on their rose-tinted glasses, their spectacles of just through which they saw each other in this rosy light. And this is kind of what we have to do if we really want love to last. But of course, that's easier said than done, isn't it? Because we look at the reality, we look at the conflicts that we have in our lives, and it's easier said than done. All you need is love. That's probably the biggest myth of our time, isn't it? We need much more than love. I'd like you just to think for a moment about what it is you want. How do you want your relationship to feel? What's your vision for a relationship? How do you want to be in your relationship? And how do you want your partner to be towards you? How do you want them to feel towards you? Because we're sailing the stormy seas of life together, aren't we? And if we're sailing the stormy seas of life, what do we need? We need a sound ship. If you haven't seen my relationship model yet, here's the beginnings of it. We need a sound hull of friendship. That represents the thing that's going to really keep our relationships afloat. But a friendship's just a friendship, and we're going to be sitting in the water, not going very far, unless we've also got sails to take our ship towards that vision, towards that happily ever island. And the sails represent the emotion, because emotion is the wind in the sails of our relationship, isn't it? Just think about your relationship and the times when you've really felt that it was going somewhere, that it was sailing, and that there was a fair wind. Think of those emotions. That's what makes your friendship actually go somewhere. But of course, where are we going? Do we know where we're going? How do we decide where to go? Well, we need to climb the rigging. We need to get up to the crow's nest. And from there, we can look out and we can catch a glimpse of our happily ever island. And that's that vision for our relationships. What do we want it to be like? Who do we need to be to create the really incredible kind of relationships that we really want? Are we willing to give what we need to give? Are we willing to become the person we need to become to have that kind of relationship? Are we willing to put in the effort? Because we still need the ship's wheel. We still need to be at the helm of our relationships, and we need to be steering that ship towards what we really want and away from the icebergs. And this is what I want to talk about tonight, because there really are just 4 things that you can get wrong in a relationship. There are only 4 things that destroy love. There are a whole load of other wonderful things, and these are the 11 relationship skills that help your relationship to thrive. But there's just one skill: avoiding the 4 icebergs. And that's the one I want to share with you tonight. That's the one that will keep your relationship afloat. The rest is a bonus, if you like. This is what stops you from sinking. So what are the 4 icebergs? What are the 4 relationship killers? Well, I'm going to do a little bit of a bit of guesswork for you. I know there may be people here who know already. Maybe you already know what these are. But here's the first one. And this can actually be very, very subtle. She doesn't look very subtle, does she? But when we point the finger at our partner, it can be the tiniest little thing. It can be just a suggestion that maybe they didn't do something quite right, or maybe they were a little bit late and you're a bit annoyed, or maybe they weren't so good with the kids. And what we're really doing when we point the finger is we're saying, not we've got a problem, let's fix it together. But what we're saying is, you're the problem, or there's something wrong with you. There's something about who you are that isn't quite working in our relationship. And you can imagine what that does to the ship, can't you? You can imagine that that changes the atmosphere on board the ship. And something I discovered very recently was that even coaching, even asking skillful questions to help your partner to change or adjust their behavior, can be a form of criticism. So that is this first iceberg: criticism. And when we do that, what we're really doing is undermining who our partner is, giving them that sense that they're not quite okay just as they are. Now, you may say to me, well, Kath, actually, there are issues and there are problems and there are things I'd like to change. Well, there are skillful ways to ask for those changes, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so just think of your relationship, and are there times in your relationship where you stumble across this iceberg, where either you're critical or maybe you feel like you're on the receiving end of criticism? Because when you're on the receiving end of criticism, of course, this is what happens. You build up your defenses. You say, hang on a minute, that's not fair. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. I'm trying my best here. And you might say to me, well, those are very reasonable responses, Kath. And what they're actually communicating to your partner is, I'm not here for you. I don't care about what you want to change in our relationship. I'm here to defend me. And that's what it is. This is about defensiveness. When we defend ourselves against the challenges that our partner might throw at us, or against anything that comes up in our relationship, when we act defensively, then what we're really doing is telling our partners that we're not there for them. And that's painful, because if you think back to how we evolved, there we were on the savannah, there we were as tribespeople, and maybe we were out and there was a pack of hungry prairie dogs waiting for prey. And if you're out there on your own, if there's nobody there with you, then you could fall prey to whatever wild beasts are out there. So when we ask our partners to be there for us, sometimes we do that through criticism. Sometimes we're doing it unskillfully. We're pointing the finger, but what we're really asking is, are you there for me? Why do you never take out the bins? Is actually, if you translate it, another way of saying, are you there for me? When are you ever going to cook a meal for us? Could also be, are you there for me? Why do you never buy me gifts? You could be really asking, are you there for me? And when we say, hang on a minute, that's not fair, you're just as bad, what we're really saying is, I'm not here for you. So defensiveness, even though it seems like a reasonable response to criticism, is just as damaging to relationships. And this is what the science of love has discovered, these 4 things. And the first 2 trigger the next 2. So what are they? Well, you can see the look of disdain on their faces. Well, this is where you've got a situation where maybe one person points the finger and doesn't get what they want, and the other person is raising their defenses and isn't getting what they want. And so we start to look down on each other. We start to wonder whether we've really chosen well with our partner, whether they're really such a great partner at all. Maybe we just think, well, they're not that great at timekeeping, are they? They're not that great with the kids, are they? They're not that great at being romantic and loving, are they? And so we start to look down on them and think, maybe we're a little bit better. Maybe we don't even know we're doing this. That slight superiority thing can come across, it can be something we even hide from ourselves. We don't even know we're doing it. And it can come across in the most subtle ways. It can be that kind of stretch of the lip, that little eye roll. And when you see those signs of contempt in a relationship, that's the strongest predictor that that relationship is not going to survive. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But what researchers have found is that when they see a number of these icebergs, a number of these relationship killers in a conflict situation in a relationship, they can predict how quickly that relationship is going to fall apart if you don't do anything about it. And of course, when you're on the receiving end of all of this negativity, what do? Well, sometimes you close your ears off. Sometimes you actually walk out the room. Sometimes you head off and talk to friends, watch the news, scroll a little bit more on your phone. You want to block out all the negativity because maybe you figure consciously, well, if I block it out, then it will go away eventually. It'll all calm down. Or maybe it's unconscious. Maybe you just can't stand listening to that nagging over and over again. But what we're really doing when we close our ears and we scroll and we absent ourselves from the relationship is that we're emotionally disengaging. When we emotionally disengage, sometimes it can look quite calm. It can look like there's not that much wrong. But that emotional disengagement is a real sign that the relationship is not doing well. So what do we do with these horrible 4 relationship killers, these 4 icebergs? What do we do with them? And are we bad people if we're pointing the finger, if we're being defensive and contemptuous or emotionally disengaging? Well, the answer is no. The answer is that all of these things are quite normal and quite natural, but they're not that skillful. And this is why I talk about love being something that we learn. We can learn the skills to melt the icebergs. Because what happens is they're a bit like deadly dominoes. Criticism knocks into defensiveness, which triggers contempt, which then triggers that emotional disengagement. And there you are in your ship, and you're sailing the seas, and you're coming across the icebergs. And you can imagine, can't you? You can imagine how it feels. Your hull is going through these icebergs, and what's happening? That sound hull of friendship that we talked about earlier is getting punctured. Slowly, those icicles, those icebergs are puncturing holes in our friendship. When we point the finger, we're saying we don't really appreciate you. When we hold up our hands in defensiveness, we're saying we don't really want to spend time with you. I don't really want to treasure that time. When we feel contemptuous, we're saying, well, I don't really feel like we're on the same level. I can't empathize with you. And when we emotionally disengage, we're saying we just really don't want to be with you right now. And if that lasts for any length of time, the message that your partner's getting from that is, I don't really want to be with you. I'm not really here for you. So what do we do to prevent this happening to our lovely relationships? That sound hull being punctured by the icebergs. Well, the first thing is to recognize that when you're on the receiving end of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, or emotional disengagement, what's really happening is that your partner is asking for something deeper. So look beneath the waterline. When someone's pointing the finger, what they're really doing is saying, I want to connect with you. It may not feel like that. It may feel like a real attack, but what they want is to get closer to you. So what do you do then? Well, if you're feeling defensive, perhaps knowing that they want to connect with you, you could take that as a compliment. You could turn it around. And we'll talk in a moment about how you can, what the antidotes are, how you can actually melt that iceberg of criticism. What happens if you're on the receiving end of defensiveness? Maybe you don't even feel like you have been critical, but your partner always seems to have that wall of defense up. Well, what they're asking for is for respect. They're asking for appreciation, for admiration. They want to know that they're okay. They don't want to have to be defensive towards you. They want to be open towards you. They want to feel close to you. And so when you know that what they're really asking for is respect, that can calm your anxiety about those walls being up. And you can find ways around it. You can find ways to build them up and give them that respect so that you melt that iceberg. And what about contempt? I mean, when we feel like we're rolling our eyes, when we feel like we're looking down on our partner, it's a horrible feeling. And I know many of the people that I work with, many of my clients will describe to me this kind of thinly veiled anger that they feel towards their partner, and they don't know why. And it makes them feel like they're in some way a bad person. But actually, it's describing an unmet need. It's saying, you're not really here for me. You're not really meeting my need. I don't know what to do about that. And so my way of defending myself is to kind of look down on you and keep a distance between myself and you. So what can you do about that? Well, you can start to ask for your needs skillfully, and I'll give you a formula for that in a minute. And what about emotional disengagement? When you sense maybe that your partner has just kind of drifted off, they're not really there for you anymore. Well, that's about peace, actually. What's happening when you want to emotionally disengage or when you feel like running away? It's actually your heart rate is rising. You may not even notice that it's rising, but if you feel like you're on the receiving end of any kind of criticism or contempt, then your heart rate starts to rise. And I've seen this in action. I actually I do some pre-marriage sessions for the local church, and one time I strapped up the vicar to a heart rate monitor to illustrate this very point. And what happens is when we're on the receiving end of an angry you, then our heart rate starts to rise. So if you hear the word you said in anger, you might just notice that your heart rate is starting to go up. And once it's above 95 to 100 beats per minute, it's physiologically impossible for you to really empathize with your partner. So I strapped up the vicar to the heart rate monitor. And he knew I was doing this as an experiment. And I started pointing the finger and I started just saying, you, in a really angry way. And everybody could see the heart rate monitor going up, 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 up. His heart rate was beginning to rise, even though this was just a demonstration. So imagine in a real situation, what happens once we're flooded. What our bodies are telling us is to escape. And this is why we want to head off and find peace. This is why we emotionally disengage. So let's look at the antidotes. How do we melt these icebergs? Well, criticism, what can we do about it? We can use this formula. It's a very simple formula, and it's got 3 parts. And it's just to do exactly what I did when I was sitting on the sofa there writing my text and saying, how I wanted my partner to change so that we could fix things. Instead of a long message of all the issues in our relationship, all I needed to do was say, I feel sad. I feel sad about this situation. I feel lonely. I feel a bit lost. I feel hurt. Those simple feeling words, maybe even just, I feel a lump in my throat, or I feel tension in my shoulders, can help us to communicate what's really going on for us, because that's more true than the interpretation of a feeling. That's more true than the pointing finger. That's more true than the criticism. You feel hurt, you feel lost, you feel lonely, you want to connect. So I feel about the situation, what I really want, what I really need is, and what is it? What I really need is to spend a bit more time with you talking about this, or I really need a cuddle, or whatever it is you need. You can use this formula instead of criticism. Instead of that even subtle type of coaching, you can simply say, I feel sad. What I really need right now is a cuddle. And it gives this amazing opportunity to your partner to come close to you instead of being defensive. What about defensiveness? What can you do about that? Well, here's the formula. Here's the antidote. You can say, I'm sorry. You don't have to say, I'm sorry. You can just say, I hear you. And then say, what did you feel? Were you feeling sad? Were you feeling lonely? And give your partner a chance to say what they were feeling. Because if you're on the receiving end of any kind of anger or annoyance or criticism, what your partner really needs is to express their feelings, not their thoughts, not their anger, but their deeper feelings. So give them that chance instead of raising up the walls. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling a bit unsettled at the moment? Are you feeling a bit trapped? We're in a pandemic, we're in lockdown. A lot of people are feeling trapped. How can I make it better? What can I do to make your life a little bit easier right now? Because that's why we're in our relationships, isn't it? We're in our relationships to love each other, to be there for each other, because we need love most when we're least able to give it. We really do need love most when we're least able to give it. So your partner's not always going to be wonderful towards you, but you can turn it around. You can melt that iceberg. So that's defensiveness. What about contempt? What do you do when you're on the receiving end of this eye roll or this sense of superiority? Well, sorry, what do you do when you are doing it? What do you do when you feel that this contempt is rising up in you? Well, you can start by feeling the appreciation. Just spend some time appreciating your partner. Because as you appreciate and admire them, that contempt starts to diminish. Just keep a working list of all the things that you really like about your partner, all the things that made you choose them in the first place, and what it makes you feel. So I appreciate you. You're really interesting. I appreciate the way you do your job with so much passion. It makes me feel proud of you. Whatever it is, give yourself and your partner an opportunity to feel really appreciated, like you're really on the same level. And that melts that iceberg of contempt. The more you go into it, the lower, kind of the more it melts, and you come back to that place where you're on the same level again. And you've still got to deal with these unmet needs. So then it goes back to that first iceberg and to that question of, I feel. What is it you feel? I feel hurt. I feel sad. I feel like I need something right now. How can you help me? This is what I need. So start with appreciation and then move on to what it is you need and ask for it in a way that your partner can really respond to. And the fourth one, emotional disengagement. How do we melt that iceberg? Well, instead of leaving the room, instead of putting our hands over our ears, what we can say is, I feel overwhelmed. I'll be back. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I'll be back in an hour. I just need to calm down a little. I'm feeling a little bit flustered. This argument is a bit much for me right now. I will be back. And we can talk about it. So that your emotional disengagement, so that feeling of wanting to run away, doesn't actually communicate to your partner that you're not there for them. You can even say, I love you, but I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. And I don't want to talk about it right now, but I will be back and we will talk about it. And then it gives you a chance to just calm down, because our emotional kind of overwhelm stops us from thinking creatively, from problem solving, from actually doing anything meaningful about the challenge that you're facing together. So it's all about being a team. It's all about being together rather than putting up these sharp kind of icebergs, these objects that puncture holes in our friendship. So there we are. We've melted the icebergs. And that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we'll have chance, I hope at a future date, just to talk about those things. And if you want, you can just book some time in my diary and we can chat about maybe how those things appear for you in your relationship. Because this is what it's all about, isn't it? It's about creating something amazing, some vessel that will help us ride out the storms of life. And a lot of us are in that place right now where it's painful, and the storms of life are really affecting people's emotions. They're affecting people's sense of well-being, the sense of who they are. I don't know if that's you. I don't know if that's your partner, whether they're really struggling through this time. Feel free to drop comments in the chat box, or just make a note of what you're thinking and feeling, and we can talk about it later. So what we need to do is to build a sound hull. And the way to do that is to learn the skills that will help our relationships to thrive. Because love is a kind of magic. It's able to do amazing things. When we love well, there are all sorts of incredible things that happen. Physiologically, we have better health. What research has found is that people live between 4 and 15 years longer when they're in loving, lasting relationships, when they know that their partner's really there for them, when these icebergs are not present in their relationship. Their lifespan actually, on average, increases. There's greater wealth in happy relationships. I mean, there's some studies that actually show that people who are happily coupled are much more likely to get promotions, because there isn't that nagging doubt in the back of their mind. Is my partner really there for them? It gives them the wind in their sails, so they can really fly, not just in their relationship, so they can kind of sail the seas of their careers and their real purpose in life as well. It certainly brings more happiness. That's an instant thing. That's something that can happen as soon as you start using these skills. That's what happened to me as soon as I started using these skills. As soon as I started melting the icebergs that were in my own relationship, then instantly you get that kind of that buzz, that tingle, that sense of being close and connected and just peaceful and happy. There's less stress, there's more security, and it gives you an opportunity to really follow your purpose, you as an individual, your dreams, your vision for life. When you're there for each other, you find ways to support one another's dreams. And that's what this is about. Having a relationship is like a scaffold. It's like the way in which we can live our best lives, the way in which we can become who we're really meant to be here on the planet. So this is a new course. I wanted to invite you to just join me today for this free little masterclass. As the start of, I'm doing a 6-week course for anybody who wants to join. Now, this is just a quick pitch for it. If you're interested, then you can head here and you can book your place on the course. It covers all 12 of the relationship skills. What we've done very quickly today is look at just one of them. And we'll go into much more detail around all 12 of them. And once you know these skills, you can have that kind of magic in your relationship. So if you're interested, here's the link. And these are the 12 skills that we will learn. We'll learn about responsiveness and what that does to your relationship, how to empathize, what love currency means, how to appreciate, admire each other, treasure the time we spend together, solve the problems that can be solved, and deal with the problems in an open way that can't be solved, how to develop intimacy and healing, how to avoid the icebergs, develop a sense of purpose together, and then navigate our way towards that purpose, towards our dreams, towards the happily ever island we really want to travel to together. And this is what the program includes. It's 3 parts. So there's a weekly masterclass, and we will open up the cameras and we will be able to chat to each other during those masterclasses as well. There's an online portal where you'll get videos. There's 44 videos in total over the course of the 6 weeks, and you'll have access to those forever. So they're there for you. And they're a reminder of these skills and some really, really practical moment by moment things you can just put into your daily life to make those skills a reality and have the best relationship imaginable. And then there's personal coaching whenever you want it. There's 3 hours of coaching that come as part of that program. So if that's interesting to you, feel free to join me for that. It's over the next 6 weeks. And this is the actual weekly program. You can take a screenshot of that if you wish and just have a little glance at what we're going to be covering. We're going to start next week with self-assessment. It's private, and one of the things that I really, really encourage is that people don't share their personal stuff. One of the things that counselling and coaching that is very, very different. Counselling is where maybe you go and you share problems in your relationship. Coaching is very, very different. Coaching is really just about having the best relationship possible. So there's no need to kind of share the challenges that maybe you have. There's no need to share the really amazing intimate moments that you have either. It's just an opportunity to learn skills. And these skills are way more effective for most couples. 7 out of 10 couples find coaching more effective than counselling. The majority of people who go to counselling, their relationships actually fall apart, because what's happening quite often in a counselling situation is that you're sharing your needs and your desires with the counsellor, and you're making your partner really feel like they're being in some way betrayed. So it does work for some people, but for 7 out of 10, coaching is a much better alternative. And it's a way for everybody. I think everybody should have relationship coaching. I think it should start in primary school, where we learn, what do we need to have great relationships? What do your children really need to have great relationships? And I teach this stuff to my kids too. So hopefully that's sinking in for them, so that when they get to have a romantic relationship, they'll be thinking about the friendship and the emotions and the purpose that they have for that relationship. So that's that program. If you're interested, if you're curious, then click on that link, or just message me, book some time in my diary if you wish. There should be a link in the comments. There isn't one yet, but I will make sure that I do that right now. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and I hope that's been interesting.